Live.
Great, thank you. Welcome everyone to the March 9th regular board meeting of Everett Public Schools Board of Directors. It's great to see all of you here tonight. I'm seeing a lot of our PTSA members, which is exciting. It's been a long year without them. So welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and move forward with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you will please join me. I pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Director Lassane, may you please provide our land acknowledgement this evening?
I would be honored to. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish, Snohomish, and Tulalip peoples. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to the ancestors of this land on whose shoulders we stand. In Everett Public Schools, we strive to create equitable outcomes and build a culture of inclusive belongings for all students, teachers, staff, and community.
Thank you. And would the secretary please call the roll?
President Mason.
Present.
Vice President Lassane.
Present.
Director Berg.
Present.
Director Mitchell.
Present.
Director Nichols.
I would like to let you know that Director Nichols did notify me just a few minutes ago that he would be a couple minutes late this evening.
Thank you. Student Representative Hussein.
Present.
And Student Representative Pilch-Bassan.
Present.
Excellent. Let's see. First item of business tonight is the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Salzman, may you please provide an overview of tonight's agenda?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to our public and to all our guests this evening, welcome. Tonight's agenda contains the following: the superintendent's report, segment for board comments, a segment for public comments, segment for routine business, a segment for strategic progress monitoring, segment for information discussion, and upcoming agenda items. There have been no changes since publishing the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, say no. The agenda is adopted, which takes us to section 6.0, recognitions. And tonight we have a couple recognitions. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to, I believe, Betty Cobbs to introduce our first person of recognition, Allison Greenberg.
Thank you so much. And it's my honor and pleasure to say a few words about Allison Greenberg, who is a finalist for the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. This is the nation's highest honor for teachers of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This also includes computer science. I've known Ms. Greenberg for over 15 years. In fact, I hired her when I was principal at Hawthorne Elementary. And I can enthusiastically attest to a high standard of work and performance that she provides in Everett Public Schools. During her first 7 years of teaching, she effectively delivered a high-level science program to fifth graders in an ethnically diverse and high-poverty school with multiple languages. This position provided an opportunity for Ms. Greenberg to apply her rich background in science as a building and district science leader. Recognized for her knowledge and her skill in the STEM field and her success with students and teachers, Ms. Greenberg was selected to be the Elementary Science and Engineering Instructional Facilitator for Everett Public Schools. She served in this position for 7 years. In this role, she supported the district's elementary teachers with science curriculum instruction, assessment, and the transition to next generation science standards. Ms. Greenberg uses research-based instructional methods and strategies to enhance the learning experience of students. And she incorporates ongoing assessment to evaluate, monitor, and improve student learning. Ms. Greenberg is a lifelong learner. She is reflective in her practice and holds a firm commitment to the improvement of teaching and learning. Throughout her 15 years in Everett, she has continually demonstrated leadership in STEM education inside and outside of the classroom. In her current position as STEM specialist at Woodside Elementary, Ms. Greenberg continues to advocate for effective student engagement in science and engineering learning that aligns with the next generation science standards and grade level standards. In addition, Ms. Greenberg coaches elementary robotics, provides STEM leadership to support teacher and student learning at the school. Her learning space here at Woodside for her K-5 learners is appropriately called the Innovation Lab. For over a decade, she has extended her outreach to teachers regionally through her work with the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction on multiple science assessment development committees and as a national speaker on elementary STEM instruction and assessments. Outside of her regular workday, she teaches courses as an adjunct professor for Seattle University's Alternative Routes to Teacher Certification program and provides national boards facilitation with Seattle University's support program for new cohorts of candidates. During the current COVID-19 pandemic, Ms. Greenberg effectively implements engaging hands-on remote STEM learning, both through a full schedule of synchronous and asynchronous lessons, as well as the time needed to provide consistent individualized feedback to each student school-wide on their work. Allison Greenberg is steadfast in her contribution to the field of science education. Her outreach to teachers throughout our district and across the state's STEM educational program is expanding the capacity for providing exemplary science education for elementary students at all levels. It is an honor to recognize Allison Greenberg as a Washington State finalist for the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. And then just to add an additional piece, Allison Greenberg is also a competitive ballroom dancer. So there you have it. She's one of ours.
Thank you, Dr. Cobbs, for such a wonderful overview. I'm starting to wonder if there's anything that Allison Greenberg doesn't do.
Can I offer something really quickly, Caroline?
I want to give her an opportunity to speak.
Okay.
If that's fine. So I noticed, Ms. Greenberg, you were with us this evening, and if you would like, go ahead and unmute yourself and say a few words.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for that very generous introduction, Dr. Cobbs. It is an absolute joy to work for Everett Public Schools these past 16 years. And I absolutely love working at Woodside. I wanted to share that during this COVID time, obviously it's been challenging for everybody, but I wanted to share that I have seen the most growth from the students at Woodside Elementary during this time. I think because of the ability to connect with them during non-school hours. And so I just wanted to share that having the technology available has been just absolutely empowering for me and empowering for the students as well. And so I just wanted to thank the board and thank you, Dr. Salzman, for continuing to champion for the one-to-one technology rollout. That was a lifesaver during this time. And then I also just want to thank you for continuing to advocate for STEM learning for all of our students. I see STEM as an equity issue. And so I'm thrilled that we have STEM throughout our district in elementary. So thank you very much for that.
And Caroline, one thing I wanted to say, I want to clarify something with Allison. I believe she and I partnered at Penny Creek with Penny Creek on the first annual elementary STEM fair back in 2009 or 10. I forget what year. My daughter is in the 5th grade, but so nice that you recognized Allison, because that was the start of great STEM work for the district. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And on behalf of the board, I just want to say thank you so much for your contributions to our district. If we were in person, I would be handing you a certificate saying so and shaking your hand, which apparently we're probably not going to be doing much of anymore. So thank you again for being here and for your work. We really appreciate you. Okay, with that, we're going to move on. Oh, one last thank you. We're going to move on to our next recognition, which is one of our key strategic partners in the district, the Everett PTSA Council. I don't know where we would be without them. We have PTAs in all 26 of our schools, including a special education PTA. And tonight we get the opportunity to show some of our appreciation for them. So I believe Dr. Sally Lancaster is going to help with the recognition.
Well, thank you very much. It is with great pride that I'm here tonight to recognize our wonderful PTA council and the individual PTAs of our district. So today I'm going to make a few opening remarks, and then we have a few principals, Bruce Rhodes, Kevin Allen, and Kelly Shepard, who are going to speak on behalf of the other principals in appreciation of their PTA. And then Council President Jen Hermann will speak briefly. So I want to thank all of our esteemed guests for being here tonight to honor this fantastic group. So today at Madison Elementary, I saw this beautiful bulletin board and it said 2021 is a rainbow of possibilities. And this made me think about the PTAs and how hard they work every single day to ensure that the possibilities in our school become realities, with students at the center of their work. Our PTAs are made up of individuals, their parents, grandparents, school staff, and community members. These smart people desire to make our schools better, and they understand that great communities and great schools go hand in hand. So COVID has impacted the work of PTAs. For example, last year we had 5,270 PTA members. So this year, we still were really proud because we have 2,954 individual memberships. So we're a little shy because we haven't had those in-person memberships. But if any of you need to join, let me know and we'll make sure we get a form out to you. COVID has had a huge impact on our PTAs, as I said. They couldn't gather in person, they couldn't volunteer, and all of the activities that traditionally defined how our PTAs operated changed overnight, virtually. But this did not stop this dedicated and amazing group. They began looking at the possibilities and turning them into realities. There's no open house to meet your teachers for cookies at the creek. No problem. You can still enjoy cookies in your car handed out by your teacher using COVID-safe protocols. And if your teacher couldn't be there, they showed up on the laptop screen so you could see their face. Instead of visiting a pumpkin patch, host a pumpkin drive-through night. No school events to connect families to get to meet each other. Virtual game nights are the answer to that. And no in-person fundraisers. Well, of course, you need to do a virtual 5K community run, walk, and roll where everyone can participate and get healthy too. Things changed abruptly last year, but that didn't change the passion, dedication, and support of our fantastic PTA members. So now we're going to have our principals make a few brief remarks, starting with Principal Bruce Rhodes from Cedarwood.
Oh, good evening. You know what? as an educator, people that are not educators don't get it, how valuable our PTAs are. And I have a standard response for them. They're in partnership with us. They collaborate with us, and they really are in service in a passionate way for our students and families. You know, they partner with our staff with everything to support the mission and vision of the school, and they bring a spark to what we're doing in our everyday life here at school. And all the extras that they bring to us are from hard work and their dedication to our students and their families. So like before and after school clubs are still going on, thanks to our PTA, and the fun activities of bingo night and other things that we don't normally have, they're coming up with creative ways to do it. The whale walk was awesome at Cedarwood this year, all over the community, and that was fun. And they support the book fairs and the food drive and toy drives for all the whole neighborhood and the whole Mill Creek and Belleville area. And classroom grants and 5th grade camp is one of the biggest things that they do. So I am just so grateful for the tireless effort and time that these people put into their work, and for our president, Krista McKee, that's had a rough year, but she's does it with a smile, and we appreciate all that, and the team that is established to really support our students and staff and families. So I'm grateful for their partnership, their collaboration, and most importantly, for their service with a kind heart and always looking out for the best of students in our community. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you very much, Principal Rhodes. And next up, we have Principal Allen from Eisenhower Middle School.
Good evening. And I also want to echo everything that Bruce said. It is an amazing partnership, and unlike anything I have ever experienced in other places that I've worked. The PTSA in my 4 years at Eisenhower has been just instrumental in so many aspects of our school. And that is in no small part to our past president, Alyssa Yee, and our current president, Jennifer Nealman, and their amazing board. They do so much behind the scenes. Both of those ladies work full-time and somehow manage to work full-time for the school in their role as a PTSA president as well. Some of the things they have done that just have really built up Eisenhower in particular, and I can speak to Eisenhower obviously, is they have created so many community engagement evenings that have brought people into our building and built our community into a true community through a bingo night. They've started a script spelling bee event at our school that brings a ton of people in, and it's actually really exciting too. Movie nights, they raise a lot of money with our PE department on fun runs, and then they give that money back through teacher grants and other things. They've brought in some great guest speakers. In the building, they have, I don't know, they're just amazing. They find people whenever we need them. And so our student store, we have a student store at Eisenhower that is manned by parents. We have Popcorn Fridays that are manned by parents, and hopefully we will have those again soon. And they assist with anytime we need them. One of the things I probably appreciate the most this year is their ability to kind of be the sounding board for all the challenges that we're facing. And Jennifer Nealman occasionally will send me an email and kind of let me know what's going on in the community and kind of keep me abreast of how the Eisenhower community in particular is feeling and what steps we need to take. And that's an invaluable piece. And so I so value the work they do and the work they continue to do, even in this environment, and the work I know they're going to do in the future. And so thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you very much, Principal Allen. And we'll have Principal Shepard from Sequoia and Port Gardner next.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I often like to start my comments with a quote, and one of my favorite writers is Dr. Martin Luther King, who says, "Life's most urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" Our school-based PTSAs and our district PTSA councils consistently answer this question by saying, anything our school, anything our district, anything our families, or anything our students need. What could be a better response than that? Our PTSA are key stakeholders in fostering the partnerships between families and school, being a connection and helping us support our students' learning and success both in K-12 education and post-high school opportunities. We are fortunate to have PTSA leaders and members that understand the needs and respond with their time by volunteering countless hours, even when schools are closed and we can't have them in our buildings. They are sharing their talents by sharing their skills, creating flyers, sharing about their life path, designing things, and they also share their treasures by helping raise funds in ways that we never thought we'd see. Hasn't been a lot of magazine drives, but there's been a lot of creative ways to support our schools. This year, I really appreciate that extra effort to engage families and change the way we do business in our remote world. Lots of reinventing, and our PTSAs have been right there alongside us. I loved it when our Port Gardner and Sequoia PTSA physically distanced delivered coffee and tea kits so families can engage in virtual coffee connection hour, or organizing creative ways to do our elementary students' favorite Valentine's Day exchange by having socially distanced Valentine's Day cards exchanged. No matter what the task we put before them, they raise to that challenge to meet our needs. You often hear the most important people in our schools are our custodians and our office staff, which I totally agree is true, but I think the third leg of that really important stool is our PTSA leaders and PTSA members and our families. They are the fabric that help weave us all together. I want to say thank you to our PTSA local chapters, our council, today and every day for the work you do to improve our students' lives, our families, and make our community a better place to be. Thank you on behalf of all of my administrative colleagues.
Well, thank you very much, Principal Shepard. And before I turn it over to Jen Hermann, I did want to add that I mentioned the PTAs are working to break down some of the traditional structures that they've had in place. And one of those is they've talked about how their group hasn't been as inclusive as perhaps they would like to be, and how they could get parents more representative of our population of students involved. So based on that, we put together a Saturday event where we had PTA leaders and natural leaders spend 3 hours together looking at their own foundational biases and trying to figure out how they could be more inclusive. So just another example of how the PTA is working to get creative and reach out and meet the needs of our families. So with that, I'll turn it over to our PTA Council President, Jen Hermann, who will speak on behalf of our PTA members.
Thanks so much, Sally. And thank you to the school board staff and everyone who spoke today, especially those principal remarks. That really means a lot. On behalf of all of our PTA leaders in the district, those that are here on the Zoom meeting tonight and those that are going to be watching the recording, I hope you all know how much your support and encouragement means to all of us in the PTA world. Last year, when school buildings closed, as Dr. Lancaster said, this put a stop to many of our traditional PTA activities, but it was through working in partnership with school leadership. Our PTAs have been able to do the creative alternatives to these events that you all are describing. And so we have been able to keep up our PTA work, and that is what really fills our buckets as far as being able to support schools and support students. So it sure looks different this year, but our PTA commitment to our schools and students remains unchanged. And the school partnership with PTA is as important as ever. We are looking forward to when we can safely get back to volunteering in the schools, working side by side with teachers, staff, and students. And we look forward to how we can continue to support the students as the schools return to in-person learning. We know there's a lot of work ahead, and we're excited to be a part of it. So again, on behalf of all of our PTA leaders, thank you so much. We value our partnership with you tremendously. Thanks.
Well, thank you for those great comments. And so traditionally at this point in a regular board meeting, we'd be handing out flowers and small tokens of appreciation. So that's not possible. And so just to let you guys know how much we appreciate it, just want to have all of our people unmute your mics for a minute, and we're going to give a real quick "We love the PTA." So on 3, unmute and we love the PTA. 1, 2, 3.
We
love the PTA.
Give them a hand. And with that, I will turn it over to our board president, Mason. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lancaster. That was great. And we're going to have to double down on the gifts and treats next year for sure. Dr. Salzman, do you have a few words before we move on?
Yes, first of all, to the PTA, we cannot do this work without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You've been with us through these changing times, and we truly appreciate you so much. And to Miss Allison Greenberg, I have a question. When do you sleep? When do you sleep? But what an honor tonight, and so worthy of this award. And thank you for representing the Everett School District. It means so much. And you have an impressive resume, extremely, and keep up the great work. You make us all very proud.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Principal Rhodes, Allen, and Shepard for being here tonight and your thoughtful words and great examples of how the PTAs are really helping support us this year in particular. What a huge opportunity for all of us to be able to recognize these individuals. The partnership and their creativity this year has just been unbelievable. So thank you again all. And I just want to mention before we move on, you are welcome to stay for the remainder of the board meeting, but we will be moving our honorees tonight into the attendee portion of the meeting, which shrinks our boxes on our screen down enough so that the directors can have some conversation as we get into some of our strategic presentations later in the evening. So thank you again for being here.
And Director Mason, when I give my report, if I can just have the principal stay on the line as I give my report, and if they can, if you all can leave, that would be great. If you want to leave, if you want to stay, you can. But if I could just have them here for my report, the principals and anybody else that wants to stay for my report.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
And with that, we are on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. First of all, again, thank you this evening for being here, to our public and to our board and to everybody that's out there listening. It was about a year ago today, pretty much, that we were notified as the COVID first student in our district, and the COVID began in a crisis in public education. And I want to share tonight that it's been one big jigsaw puzzle, but even though we closed buildings, we kept schools operating and education continued. And that takes the great work, number one, of a school board, parents, community, teachers, staff, principals, and assistant principals, and anybody else in public education. I graduated college in 1989, and I promise you I took no course how to work during a Zoom world or a computer world. There was not one course, maybe a floppy disk course I took on computers, and that was it. The tenacity, the hard work of our staff, I would measure against anybody in the United States. You know, every school gave their best. Every parent, everybody contributed to what we're doing today. And as we reflect back with a great deal of heavy load and heavy stress, and sometimes we went fast and we should have went slow. Sometimes we went slow and we should have went fast. But everybody put the students first. Everybody in the system wanted to make sure we put the students first. So I just wanted to mention that today because I was reflecting. There was an article in Ed Weekly that was just wonderfully written and really honored how our staff handled that article quite well. But the burden and the stress that was on everybody's shoulders for a year is everybody here today and every colleague and partner in the United States that worked in public education. So as we get into spring and the sun is out, what a beautiful day today, and then the hope to get everybody vaccinated in our nation, educators and everybody else, that is the dream, that we will open doors one day and we will be stronger for this and better for this, and we will learn a great deal from this. So I just wanted to thank everybody that wears the Everett Public School logo or comes to work every day or supports education. Give yourselves a pat on the back and try to think of the accomplishments that you've done this year, because sometimes that will get us through the day and night. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You can feel a different feel today than was last week or a week before. So I salute everybody. I learned a lot this year, okay? I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about our system, but we all learned a lot about each other, how we handle adversity and how we handle stress and how we celebrate too during these times. So I just want to thank you for everything, and thank you for those that stayed on the line tonight, and we'll continue moving forward. And only together can we do this work. So thank you.
Thank you for those words, Dr. Salzman. We are now on to board comments, and I'd like to know if any directors would like to say a few words or share some information. Director Lassane.
Well, unmute me. Thank you for letting me go first. I will complete this, what I have to say, and then I may have to log off and log back in my computer. I didn't take a course either in Zoom in college, but it's saying that I have to restart because of updates. I would like to start off by thanking the district, Dr. Salzman and his staff, for arranging for the opportunity for this past Saturday and this past Sunday, where our teachers and our staffs could get their COVID-19 vaccination. I would also like to thank our teachers for going forward to get their vaccinations, and also for those teachers who are in the classroom, on Zoom with students, or who are engaged with students by either email, text, snail mail, or whatever, all sorts of medium to support the educational success of our students. Thank you so very much. I appreciate you, and I really honor you at this particular time in our challenges that we're facing. One other teacher I would like to thank, or staff member I would like to thank, was in the Herald newspaper. Miss Amy Perusa, I apologize if I'm not saying your name correctly, your last name, because I haven't had the opportunity to meet you. I would love to meet you. I'd like to thank you for your outstanding support that you give our kids in transition. This is a difficult time for our students and our families out there. And you're definitely a leader to learn from. Thank you for what you are doing for our students. In addition, Ms. Greenberg, thank you. You've done an outstanding work. You're to be honored among 3, and that's fantastic. From the Presidential Board of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, thank you so much for what you're doing. Our PTSA, I cannot say enough. All of the principals said it. And so please, thank you so much for what you do. And this has been a rough time. I truly appreciate you all. This has been a year that we have endured the crisis that we've never learned for. We never took a class for. We didn't know how to approach it. And so I would like to thank you for what you did. And the families too, especially your parents that had to become the teachers and ensure that our kids were getting their education throughout the year. Thank you. I will end with that. I may have to log off and then log back in. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to fully recognize Dr. Salzman for all of his effort advocating for the teachers and the staff to get their vaccine. Because Dr. Salzman, I believe you started this well before the president said that teachers have access. And thank you so much for that. I am one of many volunteers on the Medical Reserve Corps for Snohomish County preparing the vaccines. And it is just such a, like you said, a light at the end of the tunnel. I can absolutely see it. And I'm so thankful, just like Director Lassane said, for all the staff that are stepping up to get their vaccine. I don't know when I'll get mine, but I'm looking forward to that day. The next thing is just recognizing the paraprofessionals. Oftentimes I will say teacher, and I know that the classroom and the building is much more than the teacher. So to all the staff that are in the district and in all of the buildings that support the students' development, just want to recognize them. And then in honor of Women's History Month, this is just a little aside that in my high school career, I did not have an advanced high school teacher who was a woman. Becca at Jackson only had female advanced science teachers. And I want to stress that how important having that right teacher is, be it a man or a woman, but just the fact that with Becca having female science teachers, she is now getting a bachelor's of science as her goal. And when I texted her last week and I sent her Girl Scout cookies online, and she said, "Oh, Mom, this is thank you so much, because I just had a chem test." My mother never heard that I ever had a chem test, that I did not take chemistry until I was 25 years old. So just the fact that getting the right teachers in the classroom helps all of our girls and boys be successful. So thank you to that. And then it's been a while since we've spoken. So several weeks ago, Rick Larson's staff reached out to me to talk about how it's going with the schools and the current relief bill that is back in the House with all the funding that's coming to schools, how much his time in Congress, he never really understood reconciliation until he had to learn it right now, so that we are all learning during this COVID time. But that was really interesting to have a representative reach out to me and want to get my feedback on how things are going with COVID. So I hope I represented us well. And then participated in the WASDA legislative conference a few Sundays ago, just talking about the legislative process and what's going on with different bills. And that was really interesting about, they finally announced some of the high school graduation requirements being let go a little bit. And that was still being discussed a few weeks ago, not quite sure where that was going to go. A big conversation was on a balanced calendar, especially during this COVID time, and just based on where we are now with the student slide during the summer. I don't know if it was a year-round calendar, but how do we get more schooling into the summer to catch up with people? And so it was nice to talk to Dr. Saltzman about the extended summer school plans that we have for this summer, based on some of the funding that comes from the state and the federal government to really support our kids with the extra support that they need. I am so thankful for this district. And now that we are a year into COVID, and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, really wondering what future times are going to look like, and just really excited. So thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Director Nichols or Director Berg?
I can go, or Andrew, do you want to go? No, okay. Sorry, it's like, no, you go. So I am so thankful. I've got so much to be thankful for today. And one is that this amazing district has done really an amazing job this last year. It's amazing to think that the year that we've had, but it's also amazing to think that we were the first in the nation. When I tell people that my daughter's high school was the first in the nation to have a COVID positive student, it takes the air out of a room. And I think we forget, because we went through so much in such a short period of time, how traumatic that night was. Most of you probably remember where you were on that night when you got the phone call or you saw the press release, or if you were a Jackson High School student, you might have been at an event, and once things were announced, people's phones started going off, and that event immediately started letting people they didn't know what to do, right? We didn't know what to do, and because of Dr. Saltzman's leadership and the district and the staff and the amazing heart and compassion and honestly just brilliance, we were able to really get through it and be a model for other districts and other schools. Our kids are our kids are here, our students are, I can't say everything's perfect, but my goodness, they're getting it done. And we're actually finding some silver linings, right? And in terms of how kids are learning and maybe how they're engaging. And I think about our PTA and even just their advocacy and their kind of go forward attitude, and still having meetings, still communicating with parents, still making it as normal in such unnormal times for our staff and for our students and for other parents. And if you haven't, please go online and join PTA today. It's awesome to be able, as a parent, go online, join, and still have they have the virtual hats they're passing around, right? Because they're not having events. So it's just been amazing what we've done in this last year, and the folks that have done it, I just say hats off and thank you. You're amazing. I couldn't ask to be on a better, stronger board at this time in history, because, if you haven't done it already, right, I'm sure you've all cried and you've all hugged your loved ones and went, wow, we just went through it. But at some point you're going to go, we had to do all that first. There wasn't a playbook. There wasn't a guideline. There wasn't a class. We had to do it first, and you guys did it. So I just can't thank you enough. I'm glad Director Lissens shouted out Amy Percy. I want to shout her out as well. If you don't know Amy, you have to know Amy, and Chad can tell you why. She's amazing. During this public health crisis at the beginning, Amy only thought of the kids, and she had a contingency plan, the way that we all have go bags, for if there's an earthquake. Well, Amy had that same kind of mentality for what happens to the kiddos and kids in transition if she's not able to access her files, if she's not able to have the resources she needs. And she had a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. Every community advocate and advocacy organization knows her and knows her love for the kids she works with. So seeing her recognized was, it was just amazing. And so just kudos to her and her work and her diligence. And then, I do want to say thank you. I'm so excited that our teachers, our educators, our staff are getting vaccinated. Dr. Saltzman, you are an absolute bulldog on that front. So I am thanking you for your work there and helping everybody in the state see the necessity of making sure our teachers were at the front of the line so that our schools could reopen quickly. And then lastly, I just want to do a personal shout out. I don't know, I think they might have already come out of the room, but Kevin Allen over at Eisenhower. He's an amazing principal. I think you guys all know that. What you probably don't know is that he was my son's principal in high school, my 25-year-old. When we decided to move this way, I actually looked for houses around Eisenhower so my younger kids could have him as a principal. It didn't work out, didn't find one over there. Highly recommended that school to other parents who actually live in that district now and have gone to his office and met him. And he's amazing. His heart for students and education is amazing. So I'm excited that now I can sit on a second school board with him as a principal. So just a big shout out to Mr. Allen and his work with students. So thank you all.
Thank you, Director Nichols.
I will be brief. I've been trying to keep my voice for the last week. Echo everything everybody has said already. And there's so much gratitude to go around in this district. There's so many people to be thankful for. The few specific updates I wanted to give folks as I've been diving headlong into the legislative rep role and going to, we've got different meetings. We have caucus meetings this morning. Yesterday we had the Equity Inclusion Caucus. Today we had the large district caucus meeting, and then on Thursday we'll have our regional meeting, getting ready for a week on the Hill and meeting with legislators. So lots of good talk coming all between all the districts, lots of things and lots of different perspectives. We do have several bills that we need to focus on, and they have been covered in the hot topics sheet that you should have gotten from WASDA. If not, please let me know, and I will let you know and kind of give you, we can sit down and give the game plan if you're planning to meet with our legislators. But that's it.
Thank you. Thanks for that overview too. I appreciate the time that you're putting in to represent our district at the legislative level and learn as we go. So I appreciate that. I too just want to echo what everyone has said and won't take a lot of time because I think my colleagues have been very articulate on gratitude and the reasons why. I do want to say one last thank you to Dr. Salzman and his team. Without your leadership, we would not be where we are today. And I am just so very proudful to be associated with this district, thanks to the work that all of you have done. So I just want to remind everyone that March is springtime. Technically, it is spring. It is the month of spring. So there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, both literally and figuratively. And it's the weekend that we set our clocks back coming up. So don't forget, spring forward. And with that, we are going to move on. We have
Madam President, can we go through
I am
the
so sorry.
student reps?
I know, I just realized I just totally failed. I am so sorry, you guys. It's much easier when I see you across the way there in person. Student representatives Hussein and Pilch Bisson, I would like to give you an opportunity to share as well. My apologies.
Oh, if I may, I just wanted to acknowledge that it is a Women's History Month, and this month is the time to say a thank you and to acknowledge all the powerful women that are in your life. We thank all the groundbreaking women that were able to pave the way for future generations and redefine the meaning of acting like a woman or doing something like a woman. And we actually, for our announcements, our men's basketball team made a little video, and we got a call from a parents, and they were watching the announcements as well. And they were actually saying, I looked over at my daughter and she was crying because of all the sweet things that the basketball team said and all the powerful leaders that come with Everett High. And it's already been a year since the school shut down. I know you guys are like, oh, a year already. And I know I'm saying that as well. And we're having ASB elections. It's crazy that I was able to receive the title. And going back to Women's History Month, for me, I was the first Black woman to receive the position at Everett High, and it's 100+ school history. And it's just, I'm glad that I was able to shake Everett's foundation a little bit. And but after this month, I'll be a former president, but I look forward to passing the stick to a group of people, a group of leaders that I know will continue to redefine what it looks like to be a leader. So yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. That's like, yeah, it's amazing. Happy Women's History Month, everyone. And I think it's really cool that to see how much like representation we have on this board and in the Everett School District. Like obviously there's always room for improvement, but I think that as a district we're improving pretty well on that. Yeah, and I just want to share like excitement about the upcoming legislative meetings that we're going to have. I know tomorrow it's the plan for Amina and I to tour some of the new building sites around, and then use those photos to sort of lobby for the raising or the decreasing the bond requirement to a simple majority. So exciting stuff happening. It's gonna be interesting to see people in person tomorrow. I don't think Amina and I have like ever met, so that's exciting. And yeah, just I've always been really passionate about it, sort of like legislative progress and that kind of work. So I'm excited for that. And yeah, like everyone's been saying, it's crazy that it's been a year since everything sort of shut down. And I know my life personally has sort of been turned upside down, but I think things are starting to look up. Yeah.
Thank you both for your words. I just want to also point out, you know, with Women's History Month, that both of you are women leaders in our district, and just cannot appreciate your voices and your leadership as, I mean, it's just outstanding. And the best part is you have a whole lifetime ahead of you of more of it. So thank you for being a part of our district and on the board as well. Okay, with that, now we shift to public comments, section 9.0 of our agenda. And I believe we do have a public comment this evening.
We do.
Okay.
We have one. It is from George Kosovich. And I am emailing it to you because there is an attachment that is at the bottom of the email. The public comment is this. Several days before the February 23rd board meeting, I submitted a public comment, but I understand it couldn't be heard because it was a special meeting. Ironically, my thoughts were about the lack of parent engagement and transparency on school reopening, which was the only topic on the agenda. I'm writing because I have concerns about reopening. I'd give the district a good grade for following health guidelines. That's important. Teachers get an A for their hard work, but the district gets an F for transparency, parent engagement, and equity. And as a parent, I'm left in a vacuum to wonder. What am I wondering about? First, I wonder why, after my family chose the in-person option, we were told my elementary daughter would have to move schools. That was disappointing, but not totally unexpected. But the district couldn't tell us which school she'd move to, that when the move would happen, and there were not childcare or transportation options. Is that really a choice? It didn't feel like a choice to me and felt like coercion to change our choice to online, which we did. I wonder how many other families are now classified as choosing online when you receive your board reports. Second, I wonder why the district thinks that 2 days a week of instruction plus a 45-minute Zoom is sufficient when students are falling behind. We need to do better than 2 days a week of instruction for vulnerable families. I'll repeat myself, and I hope you'd agree. We need to do better than 2 days of instruction for our most vulnerable families. As elected board members, I hope you'd challenge this one-size-fits-all thinking that works best for families with the most and disadvantages families with the least. The model seems designed with work from home professionals in mind. This is a textbook case of why achievement gaps exist. At the reopening meeting, did you hear the high school principal's comment that she's seeing sky-high rates of Fs for 9th and 11th graders, even though the district significantly relaxed grading standards? Did you hear her when she said there were disproportionate impacts on disadvantaged students? It's not any one person's fault, but by accepting the reopening model, you are accepting a model that perpetuates inequality. Finally, I'd implore you to engage parents. When you hear parent feedback, I'm sure it sounds like complaining, and it is easy hold an attitude that parents will always gripe about something. I hope you'd consider that parents can have ideas or resources that could be of benefit too. And by keeping parents at arm's length while you figure everything out behind closed doors, intentionally or not, you're missing out on community resources. I've enclosed a list of brainstorms that is too long to read here, but here are some ideas. At my daughter's school, there are 2 teachers leading Zoom PE at the same time. Library and music is similarly teamed up, and attendance for Zoom sessions is low. Can you peel one of those teachers off to increase instruction for struggling students? What if you put students in unused larger spaces like gyms or libraries? If you can increase a classroom capacity from 12 to 20 while maintaining physical distancing, that's 8 more students getting instruction a day. That could be a whole class, so you could run 5 days a week. There are dozens of instructional supervisors, coordinators, and teachers in coach roles at the district. If you identified a certificated teacher here or there to lead a classroom, that's 10 to 12 struggling students that could be in school 5 days a week. You could target the highest need students. Assign central district staff and administrators to run homework clubs or other activities. Parent volunteers could help too. To summarize, we can do better than 2 days of instruction for our vulnerable families. If the board has no interest in pushing these hard questions with district staff with a sense of urgency, I'd wonder why not? What could possibly be more important? Where is your fire for educational justice? Thank you, George Kosovich.
Thank you so much for reading, Mr. Kotsovich. public comment. We'll make sure to get back to him and provide some of the resources that he seeks, and also appreciate his ideas to help us better understand what parents are thinking, and also maybe some new and creative ways to move forward. Okay, we are going to now move on to 10.0, which is our consent agenda. Dr. Salzman, may you please provide an overview of the consent agenda?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and staff will reach out to that parent. So thank you. The board consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lists, gifts, grants, and recurring contracts. Sometimes includes items that occur less frequently but are of a routine business nature. These items are usually reviewed by the board in the Friday report, 1 or more weeks before the board meeting. This gives directors time to ask staff questions or to consider discussion about the policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion. By its definition, a consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office received one question regarding the building condition summaries. The consent agenda is presented and published for board approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Would any director like to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in new business section of the agenda? Hearing no requests, we will go ahead and move forward to the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. The consent agenda is approved. And that takes us on to our strategic progress monitoring item for this evening. And tonight we are going to have a fairly robust overview of iReady and the diagnostic tool that we're using for math and English language arts. And Dr. Matthews is going to walk us through, unless Dr. Bowden's going to kick us off. Introduce.
We're actually going to turn it over to Dr. Matthews to open, and I'll join a little bit later in the presentation.
Thank you.
You bet. Dr. Matthews, would you unmute yourself?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Having all kinds of issues here. All right. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to share an update on the iReady implementation in remote learning. You'll notice on this page, there's a tweet from Madison Elementary as they celebrated student success in math. And you will see several tweets throughout this presentation, which really speaks to the effort on the part of principals and teachers to engage students in their learning and celebrate their successes. Tonight's presentation aligns with several of our strategic plan goals. 1.1b, students meet and exceed standard by the end of kindergarten. 1.1c, students meet or exceed college, career, and life readiness indicators in grades 3 through 12. 1.2a, each student has equitable access to rigorous course offerings, and 1.5a, state and federal achievement targets are met. In terms of our 4 pillars, iReady aligns with systems and instruction. And in terms of our big rocks, iReady contributes to equitable outcomes. iReady is really a critical element in filling in the gaps that students have in their learning and helping them to access and master grade level expectations. So tonight, the objectives for this presentation are to understand the role of iReady in supporting distance learning, understand the professional development plan that we're using to enhance the skills of instructional leaders and the impact of our program, understand the supports that we've put in place for students and families, or excuse me, staff and families to better utilize the program in the remote and hybrid environments. And then we'll be sharing examples of a school team implementation. We have Tambar Creek Elementary here with Celia O'Connor Weaver, the principal, instructional coach Sharon Park and teacher Charlie Myers. And then finally, an analysis of the fall and winter diagnostic data and the fall online instructional data. So a year ago, when we moved to remote learning, we made the decision to administer the iReady diagnostic remotely, and we were really the first district to do that. We wanted to have a sense of students learning during the remote period of remote learning. We also wanted to reset that online learning path for students to continue working over the summer on those learning goals that they have. And resetting that path is really critical for them getting the right lessons at the right time. This also provided important information for us about remote testing procedures, and it helped us to improve them, not just in iReady, but in world language assessments and other assessments that we do. So this fall, we started the school year again in remote learning, and we used the information that we learned from spring testing to provide a better experience for our students and to get more reliable data. This included improving our motivational and engagement strategies to more align with the past experiences that students and staff and parents had with the program. Of course, it also reset the learning path so that students could continue to fill in those gaps that occurred over the spring, or even maybe widened over last spring. Online learning was scheduled into the daily schedule, as you can see, and teachers worked really hard to modify their student self-management strategies to increase engagement, which in the remote environment meant students taking on a greater role to manage their work, obviously. So significant changes were made also in professional development to support principals as instructional leaders of the work in the building around iReady and how that integrates into learning throughout the building. So in the fall, we began with principals and instructional coaches attending a professional development session in which they learned about the program enhancements and potential strategies for analyzing and acting on the fall diagnostic data. Each of those teams of administrators and instructional coaches then met with their own iReady trainer to plan a day to review the fall diagnostic data that was specific to the needs of the building. These were co-facilitated with between the school leadership and the iReady trainer. And that scaffolded it into the winter, where we transitioned to principal-led professional development. So in the winter, principals had the chance again to meet with the trainer and really plan the winter diagnostic for their school by using strategies that the iReady trainer shared with them. So they collaborated in their building with instructional coaches to accomplish that winter data meeting. And those are going on right now. So in an effort to support staff and parents, the Assessment and Research Department spent quite a bit of time shoring up our web-based supports in addition to our in-person supports, or I guess in Zoom supports for our schools. So this included resources such as the frequently asked questions page, links to resources in the iReady system, webinars that we provided, tips and tricks and troubleshooting advice. And then my team really manned Teams and the phone and Zoom to take questions as staff navigated this new environment. We did the same for family support, adding videos in several languages to help families understand the program. We also held a district-wide family webinar with the iReady team to share information about the program and how parents can support their students mastering the standards of their grade level. And just to really shout out to the iReady folks who helped us with that, but also to parents, 172 of which came out to learn about the program. Teachers use several strategies to celebrate success and growth And this included awards and certificates, even lawn signs that you can see around the community. These were shared in assemblies and home visits. And actually the home visits were often accompanied by school mascots and even the iReady characters, which was very fun to see. And schools were tweeting those out with great pride. Teachers also celebrated student engagement. And even though they weren't necessarily in a building, they set up the same sorts of strategies that they use to track lessons and minutes in their classroom. And you can see, I believe these are from Jefferson Elementary, where teachers set up a strategy for moving students to their targets each week.
I'd like to be able to introduce our guest panel tonight. We have an outstanding team from Tambark Creek Elementary School here today. We have Charlie Myers, who's a 3rd grade teacher at Tambark, Sharon Park, who's an instructional coach, and Celia O'Connor Weaver, who is the principal, fearless leader of Tambark Creek Elementary. And we've invited them here today to share a little bit about how they're utilizing iReady as an instructional tool and data analysis. I'm actually going to ask Dr. Matthews, thanks for stopping the screen share so that we can see the faces of Charlie, Sharon, and Celia in answering some questions. And actually, Principal O'Connor Weaver, I would really love to start with you. And if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and sharing a little bit about how you're using iReady to understand and improve student learning, and how are you using it to address learning gaps?
Thank you, Dr. Bowden, for having me. Good evening, everyone. We are very excited to be here and to brag about our students' success. So one of the ways, Catherine talked about this a little bit, but we look at the diagnostic assessment data by grade level and by teacher. And we do that during, it used to be our A-LIFT days, now it's our A-LU days. And we look at the 5-level placement, overall placement, to see what students are mid or above grade level, early on grade level, 1 year below, 2 grades below, 3 or more below, and not complete at all. So we start there with the big picture. Then we proceed to the diagnostic tool of Common Core State Standard Performance, which provides information on specific standards, which we break down into priority standards. This allows us to see the number of students who understand that specific standard, those who are partially understanding it, and then students that don't have it at all. They just don't have a sufficient understanding of that standard. And that helps us to identify the students who are struggling and develop an intervention plan. And then we also use this to create parts of our SIP and our T8 plan. We identify those students who are at grade level as well, but have holes. And that's one of the things that we've noticed with using iReady. You have students that, they look like they're doing really well, but when you dig down and you drill down into the data, there are holes, and we need to make sure those holes are filled in so they can be successful in moving to higher level grades and content. The personalized instructional summary, also, we love that. It provides information regarding lessons, lesson time on task, and lessons passed. And that's one thing we've been talking about for a few years with our teachers, how important that is. Teachers can then drill down to those specific students or their whole class. They can look at current week, they can look at previous week and month to see how the student is doing overall. And I think it's nice to meet with the teachers because iReady offers so much. And the more you use it and kind of drill down, the easier it is to find that specific information for each student. The personalized instruction by lesson allows teachers to see the classroom overview or individual students' detail broken down by strand or domain, and specific lessons to implement based on that strategy or that standard, and provide a quiz at the end of the lesson. So when a teacher is looking at that personalized instruction summary, they can provide specific lessons and select additional lessons for each student, which is helpful when we're doing intervention groups and we're having our para-eds provide support in that area as well. And I saw those pictures of us going out into the neighborhood. Sorry, Dr. Salzman, I should have tweeted those out. But somebody got a hold of those pictures. I bet it's Mr. Fleckenstein. But anyway, I loved going out to go to the homes. It was like the mountain lion was a celebrity. And the kids, the parents were more excited than the kids. And of course they wanted their pictures taken. So it was well worth it. We'll be doing another one tomorrow and selecting students. So yeah, they get a t-shirt or a game, an academic game, and then they get their picture taken with the mascot and the principal. And they get to keep the yard sign for a couple of weeks. And they didn't like that. They thought I was kidding. I said, no, I really do have to come back and pick the yard signs up because I have to share the love. So anyway, it's been a ride. We love the program, and I'm going to turn it over. I hope I answered questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Sia. And Mrs. Park, as an instructional coach, can you tell us a little bit about how you use iReady to support your work with both classroom teachers as well as students?
Well, first, thanks for having me. I love that you've included coaches and principals and teachers to hear how we're using iReady. I actually like to consider myself this year really a strategic planner. I kind of look at where I can marry iReady, remote learning, hybrid learning, with curriculum materials and additional resources to kind of find what works with strategic planning in terms of supporting SIP plans and building plans and long-term or short-term T8 plans, as well as teacher plans. So generally, recently, I've been looking for trends in students in the teachers' classrooms, as well as across grade levels. With those trends, I help align teaching practices using iReady data, along with math curriculum and resources to plan for small group work. All of this plans support SIP plans and instructional review next steps. Sometimes this work is with specific grade level teams, specific teacher pairs or teacher teams, or individuals. I also use reports to plan for next steps to refine instructional practices in a hybrid and a remote setting. This may look like me modeling a lesson, co-planning or co-teaching with next steps using iReady data. And then one of the things that we also look at are the prerequisite skills and plan for topic groups and recommendations, especially because I work closely and monitor students that need intervention. As Celia mentioned, our most recent work was using the Common Core Standards report from the winter diagnostic, and that definitely helped us identify the gaps in the priority standards. And our biggest focus from our recent data dive was to make a plan to progress monitor. And I just wanted to say that Teaching Remotely has definitely put an emphasis on using technology as a tool for progress monitoring. So at Tamberg, we're really proud that all the K-5 teachers are using iReady and using it as a tool to progress monitor, and then making a plan for additional tools such as performance matters or quick checks to gather information to better refine our practices as teachers, coaches, and principals.
Great. And Ms. Byers, as a third grade teacher at Tambark Creek, how do you engage students in iReady to support learning in the classroom? And how is iReady used in your collaborative work?
So to engage students, a big part of that is goal setting for each individual student. So on average in my classroom, students have a goal each week to pass 2 reading lessons and pass 2 math lessons. And they are in charge of tracking their own progress. So they have a sheet and they write down the lesson title and the date that they took it and what they're passing or what their score was. And this helps them see if they're repeatedly passing their lessons or if they're repeatedly failing them. And we can have a conversation if they're failing them on why that is and be able to set a specific goal to help them pass their lessons more consistently. And I also keep track of that, just if they pass their goal and as they meet it, I have a button on my Canvas page that they can monitor and see if their name's on the chart, and that really helps them. And then so far this year, I was remote, now I'm hybrid, but I would have a conference or a data chat with students every month, and we talk about a variety of topics and areas, but one of them was always iReady, and we'd look at how they're passing their lessons and how they're doing, and that really helps them have some accountability as to getting onto iReady and taking their time and really focusing on those lessons. And for a little incentive, if they meet their goal, they get to do free choice on Friday, which they love. And if they didn't quite meet their goal, then during that time, they just work on iReady. And I sent emails to parents, letting them know how their kid is doing with their progress on a regular basis. So that really helps engage students in getting onto iReady and getting those lessons done. And then in terms of collaborative work, we really use iReady data as a way to determine small groups and which students can receive that reading and math support in a small group setting. And we look at which domains are the lowest in our grade level and the highest. And for those domains that are the lowest, we can really pick out which specific standards we can focus on as a grade level. And so, for example, third grade, we just met, and one of those standards is word problems in math. So yes, we've already been including word problems, but we can really make a targeted effort to include that in each of our lessons and specific strategies to help our students grow in that area. And we can really look at iReady to pick out those specific standards that align with our school improvement plan and be able to target those areas.
Fantastic. Thank you very much to our guests. Dr. Matthews and I always get excited when we talk about data, but it's always awesome to hear from the actual practitioners of how you're using it in really meaningful ways to increase student achievement. I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Matthews to review some of our participation data.
Thank you, Dr. Bowden, and thank you to the Tambar Creek team. It's really exciting to hear about your work, and I love working with you guys. As Dr. Bowden said, we are always excited to talk about data, so I get to do that next. So what you're seeing in front of you right now is the reading online lesson participation for the months of September through December. So that's the first window between the fall diagnostic and the winter diagnostic. And September is always a little bit low because that is when we're testing. So really October, November, and December are more indicative of the number of students who are participating. So the number in blue indicates the number of students who engaged in completing lessons. The numbers in orange, or the orange part of the bar, are those not completing lessons. So you can see for grades 2, 3, and 4, we're roughly around 80 to 85% of our students. It drops a little bit at 5th grade, about 75% of our students. Kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, iReady is not mandatory for them in reading. So you'll notice that only about 25% of our kindergartners engaged in the fall. And that is not unusual because kindergartners are also doing Walk Kids and DRA and all of that stuff as well. A little bit better participation by our grade 1 students, but still district-wide about 60% engaging in lessons. This is the fall and winter diagnostic data for each grade level, kindergarten through 5th. Gray indicates the percentage of students who did not take the diagnostic. So you can see kindergarten has about 60% this winter not taking it, and in the fall about 77%. So more students in the winter, but not fully all of them. And as I said, that's not required for those grade levels. As we get into 2nd through 5th grade, much higher percentage of students taking the test. In the dark green, that's the percentage of students who are at or above grade level. And the light green, it's early on grade level, which means ready to learn the standards of the grade level. In the fall, those greens are right where we want them to be, right? Ready to start 2nd grade. But when we get into the winter, that's really about a half a grade level behind, and we want to watch those students, though they're close. We don't want them to slip any farther behind. In yellow, those students are a full grade level behind, and then 2 and 3 grade levels behind. So certainly for these students in the yellow, orange, and red, it's very important that they're hitting those online learning lessons now through the spring and into the summer to get ready for next year and really fill in those gaps that they have in their learning. Here's our math online participation, and it follows a similar pattern, although in grade 1 we have far more students because it is required in grades 1 through 5, not in kindergarten. So again, only about 25% of kindergartners engaging in online lessons. We do see that dip at grade 5. So that's something to watch. We like to see it closer to this 80 to 100% of kids completing lessons. Here is our math fall and winter diagnostic data. And same pattern, of course, we saw in reading increase from fall to winter in every single grade level, but it is more pronounced in reading. So we're lagging in math, and we certainly need to make sure that students are hitting those online learning targets to fill in the gaps, because we certainly don't want them to get any larger. In grade 1, notice about 10% of students reaching that mid to late or higher grade level, so about a 10% increase. And that's about the largest one. In reading, we saw a little bit larger increases. So we definitely want to be focusing on math. And for all the schools that I have connected with, math is definitely on their radar. It's part of their SIP plan, it's part of their T8 plan, and certainly a focus for all of us. So next steps. Right now, principals are leading professional development to analyze the winter diagnostic and plan for instruction and filling in those gaps as we head into the spring. Online instruction is well underway, and at all levels, we're monitoring that participation. We are continuing to engage students and celebrate success in creative ways. You heard Principal O'Connor Weaver talk about recovering the lawn signs, so we can do another round. And then there will be an optional window in the spring to reset the learning path, and that's because we want kids to have the right lesson for where they are right now. And so as we go into the summer, students will have access to the program until the middle of August, and we want those lessons to be appropriate for them. So we'll run that optional window at the end of the year. So we're resetting that path right before we leave for summer. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Matthews, for the overview and the detailed information. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions from directors. Just hold your hand up, give me a wave if you're interested in Director Nichols.
So I know we've talked previously about kind of where our district is at with math, and we definitely have some ground to make up. My question is more kind of geared towards the iReady completing assignments. Are we finding that the reason we have students still not completing assignments in iReady is that because teachers, if there's certain like a holdover of teachers that just aren't comfortable with the online learning software, or is it just we don't know yet what's keeping them from engaging?
Well, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think there are a lot of factors this spring and fall around engagement. Certainly we've provided students with technology and the Wi-Fi, but during asynchronous time, it can be challenging for students to work on their own. And I know teachers are working hard to incorporate this, but certainly we have ground to cover. You're absolutely right in terms of using the program to fill in those gaps more effectively. We're seeing it working definitely in reading, but when we look at the number of students who are not taking the diagnostic or not engaging in lessons, that's really where the ground to gain is. If you're not doing the lessons, giving a test is not going to change a thing, right? And even giving a test twice is not going to change a thing. It's what happens in between that test. And for our kids, that means instruction with a qualified teacher every single day, and then methods to fill in those gaps. So using those online lessons, that's where we're going to get the traction. And in addition to filling in the gaps, it really allows a student to access on grade level instruction that they might really struggle to understand if they are missing key information.
I think the other piece, just to add in with, I know that teachers, I think many of our teachers are utilizing iReady lessons as part of the asynchronous support, where it provides a tailored instructional lesson for students directed at their level when they don't have the support of an adult right there. And as I believe that Mrs. Park was talking about, one of the pieces in thinking strategically around using that data to drive the instruction for TA monitoring and things like that, we're developing plans based on that. So you see things like, how do we engage kids and get them enthusiastic and celebrating the use of that? But teachers are also utilizing, with the assistance of their principals and their coaches, that data to help really tailor in. And that's the power of some of those data chats, is when you sit with a child and like Ms. Myers was talking about, when you sit with a child and really talk about their data, what it means, how can they develop ownership with that? It's also another way of helping them to engage and see that iReady is a part of their learning tools, and it's a valuable part of their asynchronous work as well.
That also makes me wonder, I know we generally like to see that gradient for the winter and fall assessments. It's moving down, right? So they're meeting. Are we tracking folks that are backsliding? So they're at the beginning of the school year, they were a grade level behind, and now at the end of the school year they're 2 grade levels behind. Or do we have any meaningful data there that?
Teachers and principals, they are watching the growth in the diagnostic. So it's unlikely that a student is going to get a whole nother year behind. Like if they knew that information, they're not really going to lose it. And that's really where the professional expertise of the teacher comes in, because you want to look at that diagnostic and say, did the child rush? Were they having a bad day? Do we need to retest them? And sometimes if you have a situation where a student is maybe frustrated, you might say, you know what, we're going to start your lessons where you left off. We're not going to go back and do lessons that you've already shown that you can do. So there is that element of professional decision that, teachers put into this. I think, what we definitely don't want is any widening of the gap, especially through this last year, because it's been challenging, of course.
Right. So generally overall, the trend is that when the numbers are moving, they're moving more towards mastery as a whole. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, we have some students who are stagnant, but those typically are students who aren't engaging in the lessons.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I have a follow-up question on that. I guess, have you taken the opportunity to look at sort of on a district level or a grade band level, how we compare to the SBA on ELA and math compared to the iReady diagnostic? Because my assumption is that they both are, they're both calibrated to the standards. And so, do we have that ability to say, okay, maybe it's a spring diagnostic because the SBA is a spring test, but do we have the ability to say, okay, in 2019 in the spring, our 5th graders were here on the SBA, and in 2020 or 2021, in the spring, our 5th graders are here in reading, to kind of do that analysis at a grade level?
Yeah. So of course we don't have the SBA from last year, and it'll
but I'm thinking the most recent.
Right. Yeah. So when we started this process, actually, I ran that data initially, and we found the correlation. Okay, so not causality, but the correlation between SBA and iReady scores was upwards of 0.7 for every grade level, and in some grade levels upwards of 0.8, which is a very high correlation. So if you think about it, like a 0.3 is the correlation between your hair color and whether or not you like pickles, right? It's a chance. And a 0.5 is, but when you get into 0.7 or 0.8, you're saying that, as one rises, the other score rises as well. So again, not causality, but a good indicator of what we might expect in terms of our scores. And it was that high for every grade level and every test.
I'd like to also piggyback on something that Andrew brought up to find out where we're going. At one point in time for the SBA and the other tests that we were doing, we did a cohort comparison so we could see what happened with the third graders when they moved to fourth grade, when they moved to fifth grade, and things like that. So we could see their progression. Is it possible? I mean, here we're looking at fall and winter. Can we now take this data that we have, at least for this year, and compare it to what we had for last year or the next year? And then we can see how one of the things we do know is our math scores. We need to do better in math. We are working on that area. We can see how each one of the grades are doing and find out, is it that fifth grade class we're having concerns with, or is it the second grade class or a third grade class? How is the cohort comparing as they move up, and what kind of progress are they making as a cohort?
Yeah, I mean, we can look at their relative performance. Were they at standard for their grade level the year before? Are they at standard now? Yeah, we certainly can get that data.
Director
I
Berger.
think yeah, I was just going to jump in, kind of piggybacking on what you guys have already talked about. It feels like when I look at this data, it's worse than the SBA, right? Like when I looked at the SBA data, I felt good about our third grade numbers. I felt good about our fourth grade numbers, and they got slowly more disturbing as they went up. But this shows me, and I feel like it might just be that whole asynchronous learning, and this is just not connecting with a lot of kiddos, so it's not looking as good in certain diagnostic areas. But I guess, yeah, just kind of sticking a flag in that, because it'd be interesting to see if now there's a lot more correlation. But my question is around middle school, and I know we've talked before, kind of cursory, about introducing iReady into our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and is that still on the table, and is it being done some more? I felt like there was one middle school using it.
There is one middle school that uses iReady, Evergreen Middle School. It's a challenge at middle school, not necessarily about the program, but more about the structure of middle school. So, at elementary, you have a teacher who has kids all day long, and they structure their day with that group of students. At middle school, you have kids coming in and out of periods, and to get that 45 minutes in during a regular school day can be challenging when you have, for example, 45 minutes of math or 47 minutes of math a week. So our challenge has been figuring out the best way to implement it so that it's actually used in a way that will make a difference, because obviously we want the resource to actually move the needle, right?
Thank you for that.
I have a question of Charlie as a teacher. I appreciate all the other conversations, but now that we've had iReady here a couple of years, how does that affect or make an impact on grading, to calibrate grading? Specifically, this is sort of personal, where my daughter in the 4th grade got a 4 in math, and then when we got her SBA, she was barely above the line. And so I did wonder, how did that happen? And I'm thinking iReady might help the parent better understand where their student is with math, so when they get the SBA in future times, when we can get that again, that the parent can say, okay, if my child got a 3 in math, or a 4, or a 3 or 4 and got at standard, above standard, that's sort of calibrated towards your grading. Have you found iReady? How does that go into your grading to sort of calibrate things?
Yeah, so when I put together my grades, I look a lot at this in-class assignments that I have given them and that I have given those tests, because iReady is a program that they do on their own. And so I use it more as, here's what I think their grade is, let's look at iReady and kind of compare and see if it's consistent across both boards. So I don't use iReady solely as grading, because it's one data point that I use, but I do compare it and see if there's like this huge discrepancy, why that might be. But it's kind of just to confirm what grade I'm thinking of giving them. Does that make
Okay, so
sense?
yeah, like if a student does really great on a worksheet, but then iReady shows some deficiency, you go, oh my goodness, what's happening? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. That's what I
So,
wanted to
yeah, and then
appreciate.
if there is a discrepancy, I can provide that intervention that I need, but I don't want to give them a grade just based on this and not look at everything else. So I just look at everything full circle.
But it adds to the tools that you have.
Yeah, it's another data point that I can use to see for each standard.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I have one other question I was wondering about. So in a perfect world, which actually it's not a perfect world right now, but if, we have leaned on iReady this year as a diagnostic tool in light of no SBA and some other, in-person options that are not possible, what would be sort of the wish list of any additional information that iReady could provide? Or, really my question is what are its limitations in terms of the way that we're using it right now in the remote environment? And I just ask this because, as board of directors, we approve the curriculum, we look at programs like this, we make a fairly significant investment in iReady. And I would just love to know, how robust is it for all grade levels, or not all grade levels, but at the elementary level?
Well, I will say very robust. It gives us a tremendous amount of information. I think Celia O'Connor Weaver gave a great review of the different types of data that they get out. Now, one thing that we didn't talk about, we're just starting, is standards mastery testing, which has not been available in the past because of how iReady implemented it. But with the remote learning, they have found a new way to do it, and that has really opened it up to schools. And I'm not sure if Tambar Creek is using it, but standards mastery allows teachers to give a test aligned to specific standards that they are teaching. So remember, the diagnostic is intended to look at a student against the grade level standards and then identify the gaps in prior grade level standards, or identify the standards of higher grades that the students already achieved. But the standards mastery test is a shorter test aligned to specific standards. So if I'm teaching a unit on fractions, then I can give a standards-based test just on that unit and get that dipstick of where my students are. So that's another powerful tool that is available.
Great, thank you for that.
I forgot to mention. Oh, sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to add, I think that the iReady, just the data reports that were instantly formulated, the different data reports that iReady can provide us are amazingly timely in terms of getting feedback and planning for next steps. When we look at data reports and plan on using the iReady Standards Mastery Report, it gives us an extra set of tools to refer back to. So we may not technically use it to give students a grade, but it, like Ms. Meyer said, it gives us opportunity to check in terms of engagement. It gives us opportunities to check in terms of why students may not be passing certain lessons, or is there a language barrier, and so even with iReady, we use it as a tool for English learners, not only for math and reading. So in terms of engagement and next steps for planning, I think it's just been really beneficial to have the additional data points, the different reports that it provides, and then just an access toolbox with the resources that's provided online.
Thank you for that additional detail. Director Nichols?
I just forgot to mention that on one of the WASA legislative calls, I got to brag about Dr. Matthews and our district with iReady and Performance Matters, and how it's really, we were talking about various legislation for funding for learning loss and things like that. And somebody asked, how are different districts tracking these types of metrics? And I got to say we have a great data team that is looking and using all these tools, and they're really supporting our teachers and doing all these things. So just wanted to say thank you again for that. Let me kind of fluff our feathers out there.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, any further questions? It looks like not. So I would like to thank Principal O'Connor Weaver and Miss Park and Miss Myers for being with us. Thank you so much for bringing your firsthand experience with iReady. I always say this, but it's just so helpful for those of us who are not in classrooms to better understand what it looks like and how you're using this instrument and tool to enhance and improve everything for our students. So thank you again for being here. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting or go have some dinner.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, we are going to move on to 12.0, which is our information and discussion section. And tonight we have an enrollment outlook for 21 through 2030, which I think Mr. Gunn is going to help us understand is a bit challenging right now, given the nature of our educational delivery. But I think it's going to be a lot of great information in terms of how we're moving forward with the number of students in our district. Mr. Gunn?
Okay, well, thank you for that. Can you see the presentation up on the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. All right, so so this is our annual review of enrollment projections. We do this every year, and we share with you what has happened in the recent past, and then what we think our future looks like. And this year, like so many things in COVID, there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty and complexity in the projections around what's going to happen in the future. And so much depends on variables beyond our control. To understand the implications that enrollment has for us, enrollment drives over 60% of our total general fund revenues and directly affects, of course, staffing levels. We certainly use it in facilities planning to look at bonds and levies. Occasionally, and only when we really have to, we look at boundary revisions. This helps us understand how we can use space and where to move portables, where to buy properties, and then helps feed into our capital facilities planning. School impact mitigation fees, and then where and how we allocate technology. And then finally, if that's not enough, we look at program locations and school transfers. So which schools we will allow transfers into. So all that is directly related to enrollment. This is a slide that we have every year in the presentation. And for the first time in, what is that, 50 years or so, we are showing a marked decline. This decline is about 631 students right there in a one-year time frame. And we'll go over that in more detail in the presentation. Where we ended up, and this is a comparison of the actual enrollment to the projected enrollment over 1 year. So a year ago, that is a year ago, we were predicting that this last fall, we would be at certain levels, and this is how the actual differed from that. We came in, the actual enrollment, October 1 of 2020 was 815 below Les Kendrick's medium range projection. Kendrick, as you know, gives us a high, medium, and low projection. We also get a projection from OSPI. And historically, Kendrick has been really pretty close on the medium range projection. And this year, due to all the issues that came with COVID, it's quite a bit off this year. To give you some actual numbers, the actual October 1, 2020 enrollment was 815, lower than Kendrick's medium projection. It was 1,031 lower than OSPI projections right there. And it was an actual year-over-year decrease from the October 1, 2019 enrollment. To compare the 2020 enrollment to the 2019 enrollment, We, at the elementary level, we declined by 545 students. Middle school declined by 137. And at the high school, we actually increased by 48 students. Certainly, we attribute these declines to COVID-19 and the cancellation of in-person learning. Enrollment was down across the entire Puget Sound region. And some other variables to this is that home sales in the district have been tracking down since 2016. They're still building homes. In fact, in our district, we're building more multifamily homes than single family. That's the dynamic that's happening. But in relation or in comparison to other districts outside the Seattle area, some of those are still building homes a lot faster than we are. So the actual home sales have been tracking downward. The number of births in the county have declined over the past 3 years. And then notwithstanding all of this, regionally, our population forecasts are continue to grow across the region. So we have this whole mix of things going on. I'm going to show you the growth in Snohomish County across a range of school districts. You'll actually, at the bottom of these bars here, you'll see some numbers. I've decided to kind of focus on 4 school districts. Edmonds, percent decline 1 year of 2.3%. Everett was at 3.1%. Sultan was 5.2%, and then Index was 9.7% decline. So you can see that, of course, the declines were across the region, except for Granite Falls experienced a slight increase. One of the things I wanted to share with you, though, the next slide is going to show the actual number of students at these 4 school districts. And you can see that even though Index had almost a 10% decline, the actual number of students that they declined was 3 students. So it just helps you understand that the percent of change is not necessarily the best indicator of what's really happening. Because this could be just one family decided to move out of the district or something. But at any rate, Everett had the largest number of student decline, even though percent-wise it was not nearly as large a percentage decline as many other districts in the region. So the sources that we use for enrollments, Les Kendrick, again, high, medium, and low, OSPI, and then there's a population-driven method that comes up with a ratio of enrollment to population, and that's driven by OFM projections. Factors influencing projections, you can see birth rates, historical trends, how many students roll up to the next grade level, housing, and then economic conditions. And then I wanted to mention that we used Kendrick's medium range projection historically. This year, Kendrick has recommended that for budgeting purposes, we use a low range projection, and for facilities, we use the medium range projection. So our finance office takes Kendrick's projections every year, and then Karen Buckman and some other staff there, they fine-tune the enrollment projections to use for staffing and budgeting. So what I primarily try to present to you is the kind of what we use for facilities use. So here are the elementary projections looking out over 10 years. Kendrick's high, medium, and low projection are shown there, and then this is the OSPI projection at the bottom. You can see that the OSPI projections only look out 6 years, whereas Kendrick looks out 10 years. So that's the difference. And you can see that OSPI is much more pessimistic, and I would attribute that to the methodology. OSPI actually looks back 6 years and then predicts that the future will look just like the past. Kendrick actually starts with that, and then he modifies the projections based on birth rates, housing market, the economic conditions, and then a number of other variables. So historically, Kendrick has been more accurate than OSPI, but it's a good way to, we try to look at all the sources of data. This is the middle school projections, much lower than the elementary projections. We'll look at more of that in here in just a minute. And then high school, it'll show the medium range projection shows growth for about 3 years and then some flattening out and then some continued growth. So all of that adds up to district-wide, a gradual increase. And I would kind of jump to, at the end of the presentation, I'm going to say basically we're continuing to grow, but at a reduced rate from what we were looking at last year. Okay, so this is a closer look at what happens in a one-year projection. We are predicting that next year we're going to be 650 students higher than we were this year. Last year, we predicted a growth of about 185 students. So what is happening here is that Kendrick is predicting that basically the number of students that we lost from last year to this year, we're going to regain those next year. That's kind of the short story on how to think about that. So the decrease from 2020 to 2021 dropped 631 students. And you can see that next year we are projecting to increase by 650 students. So we declined 631, now we're going to grow by about 650. So it's very, very much related. In fact, that's another way to understand what's happening. The growth that we predicted is going to continue. It's just that we've skipped a year. We basically dropped down. Now we're going to regain that, and then we're going to continue to grow over time. Over 10 years, we're looking at 2,041 student growth. Last year, we were predicting an 11-year increase, and we used different timeframes for a variety of reasons. But last year, we were predicting that we would grow over 11 years by about 1,483. So now you can see we're predicting more growth because we're doing that 1 year of catch up. That first year, this next year, we're going to be growing by about 500 or so, 650 students rather. And so that adds on to the 10-year growth projection. We look also at the various regions. This first area is a 6-year outlook and then a 10-year outlook. North, Central, South. So you can see that we're growing in all regions. If you look at the total growth, even though at the high school and then at the middle school, there will be some declines in certain areas. So I'll give you an example. If you look at the high school, when it says South, by the way, that's Jackson High School. And when it says Central, then that's Cascade. And when you say North, that's Everett High School. So in the 10-year time frame, Jackson High School's enrollment will decline by 131. Cascades will grow by just over 200, and Everett will grow by 446. That basically is what we had orchestrated when we did the high school boundary changes. Remember, the whole idea was to shift enrollment from Jackson High to Cascade and then from Cascade to Everett. Well, this projection shows that that is still expected to come true. So getting near the end of the presentation, I wanted to mention that there are some assumptions used in these projections. One is that it's assumed that at least some in-person schooling will come back in the fall of 2021. When Les Kendrick met with us and was developing the assumptions to use, it was in late November, and we still hadn't brought students back by then. So he was basically saying you have to bring students back if you want to have your enrollments to come back. And so that brings up the second assumption, and that is the less in-person schooling you have, the lower the enrollment gains are likely to be. So once again, Les Kendrick is recommending that for next year, we use low range projections for budgeting and staffing and medium range for facilities. Beyond that, he still expects that the medium range forecast model would be the one to use. And we always try to give the board a snapshot of what, how accurate Kendrick and OSPI projections are. And the way that I explain this is that this is the absolute value of the difference in enrollment from the projected numbers to the actuals. So we have, for these various years down here, we've looked at both Kendrick and OSPI projections. And then, for example, the 6-year projections, we've looked at how many students in the 6 years, in the 6-year outlook that Kendrick was off, and then whether it's high or low, and then also OSPI. And you can see for the entire range of projections, 1 through 6 years, Kendrick's projections are on the average have always been more accurate than OSPI's. So that's part of the reason why we use Kendrick's projections instead of OSPI's. So the next steps from February to March and then beyond, we'll use the enrollment projections to drive staffing, budgeting, transfers, whether we approve them or not, locations of programs, ultimately whether we need portables, and then how we allocate technology, and then it'll feed right into the series of board presentations and discussions we have around the upcoming capital levy that will culminate in November, when we ask the board to, we expect we'll be asking the board to consider approving a capital levy resolution for 2022. And then in September, we ultimately will see how many students we get and adjust staffing based on the actual enrollments. So in summary, enrollment numbers are extremely important in our short and long range planning, affect revenue, staffing, and many other aspects of our operations. And the high level prediction is that the enrollment growth rate will continue across all grade levels, but at a reduced rate. And that completes my presentation, and I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn, for the great information. Could I ask that maybe the presentation be pulled down, and directors will have an opportunity to ask some questions? Certainly a challenging year for projections. I'm actually going to ask a question about, I know that kindergarten was our largest grade band for reduction in enrollment from this past year. Is that correct?
You know, I know it was at the elementary level, and I would guess that it is at the kindergarten level. Yes.
Yeah, I'm wondering. It makes.
I was going to say enrollment overall was 4% down. Kindergarten was 15% down.
Okay, so as we look forward to next year, I guess what I'm wondering is, have we considered? It makes perfect sense as a parent that if you have a kindergartner and they're going to be trying to do Zoom learning for the year, which is not as accessible to that age group, that you hold them back a year and start kindergarten a year later. Do we anticipate a bubble in that grade band? Have you sort of looked at that, and is that what we're thinking?
Yes, Jeff, do you have any insights on that? You had the other stuff. I thought you might have this too.
Well, the estimated enrollment returning is 353, which is closer to the lower amount. The majority of that estimate is in elementary, and much of that is in kindergarten. We give schools a total allocation in terms of staffing, and the principals have the best guess on where to place teachers in anticipation of the return of students. So on the ground, the number of kindergarten teachers is really a site-based decision.
Great, thank you. And typically in this presentation, we see a chart that shows enrollment by school and capacity, which schools are at capacity, over capacity, and typically it's almost all of them. This year, obviously, that's a much more difficult slide to show because no school is over capacity right now in terms of being in a classroom, which is a big part of our capital facilities planning. how do you handle that without, do you wait till next September to sort of look at building capacity?
No, we pay a lot of attention to building capacity. We actually have recalculated all capacities based on the 6 foot of physical distancing. Now we're re-looking at that based on 3 foot of potentially a change to 3 foot. So we look at that a lot. The school by school projections for Les Kendrick's, we are attached to board docs. We just didn't go through them in this presentation.
Thank you. I will take a look at that.
Yeah, what we did not cover here tonight, and you pointed it out, and that is the capacity numbers. We will be covering that in the I think the upcoming 5 board discussions that lead up to the November levy resolution discussion. So I think that we're coming back to you in May and then June with more information, and we'll be sure to bring that forward at that time.
Excellent, thank you. I look at those 10-year projections of over 2,000 new students in our district, and the fact that as of last year, I think all but 2 or 3 of our schools were over capacity, and where we're going to fit all those students in is a wonder. So I'd like to open it up to directors as well, other directors as student representatives, if you have questions regarding the presentation.
I have a question, if I may, President Mason.
Please.
One of the concerns that I have been hearing about is that public education took a very large hit with this COVID year. And we understand, you know, kids will be coming back to classrooms. There's 2 questions I have. And the first one is kindergarten isn't a mandatory class by state law, right? But education starts at 1st to 6th grade. So a lot of parents may have kept their kids back because of that. And they plan on bringing the kids back in once they begin 1st grade at 6, 7 years old. With that being said, there are still some parents that may tend to move their kids to private schools versus public education. Have we looked at what the outlook might be based on realization that some kids that were attending public schools may not be coming back to public schools and going to private schools in the fall in 2021?
I think that is one of the reasons why Les Kendrick has recommended that for budgeting and staffing purposes, we use his low range projection. This time, in all of his projections, he lowered everything by 0.5% as well. So even the medium range projection this year, he dropped about 0.5% just to accommodate the reductions that we see across the system. So I would say it is a concern that we have noted. And I think ultimately what happens in the fall in terms of enrollments will be the result and responsive to a variety of factors, some of which are within our control and some are not. Trying not to give a vague answer, but I think there are so many variables that go into what the enrollment might look like in the fall that we're just trying to keep an eye on the whole thing and do a really good job planning how to bring students back and have them all come back.
Mike, if I might just add also, we have several community partners in, the Y and other places where we have pre-K programs who are serving students, and we also have our transitional kindergarten programs that we've established 4 classrooms this year, and those students will be coming into kindergarten. So as we're starting kindergarten registration, building principals are working really hard to connect with those local childcare providers within their feeder areas to kind of track and say, hey, how many students might be coming up to kindergarten this year? How many students we're supposed to be in kindergarten this year and are now rolling up and going to do kindergarten because we've held them back, like President Mason said. So building principals, as they're engaging in kindergarten registration right now, are tracking some of that pretty closely and hoping to recoup some of that enrollment to get those numbers back up.
Thank you very much.
Along with that, Shelley, how are we doing with like those a lot of the childcare providers did add kindergartens, I believe. So also, are we also promoting first grade enrollment for those students also?
Yeah, typically principals also track that, and that's because often many of our local daycare providers or private schools like a church might offer a kinder program, but not a first grade program. And often I know that principals, as a former elementary principal, I tracked where those programs were, because often you not only get a bumper crop at kindergarten, but sometimes you get surprised with a bumper crop at first grade, where families are keeping kinder at a private kindergarten preschool kind of program, and then surprise, you've doubled your first grade numbers. So most of our principals are aware of where those programs are at. And I know that Ann Arnold, our early learning coordinator, has done a really nice job of coordinating and connecting with our pre-K programs and some of our institutions that have private kindergartens as well, so that we're not surprised by some of those numbers.
I've got a couple questions / comments. So one, I am really worried that the projections might be maybe a little bit high. And the only reason I say that is, and it's sort of anecdotal, just that it feels like the parents that have made that choice to go to privates are pretty happy, right? They were heavily recruited, they were heavily, promised the world, and they've gotten a little bit of it. And so I'm wondering if we're going to not just be aggressive in recruiting our kindergartner class and our first grade class, but across the board in elementary. And I've seen districts, especially on the Midwest and East Coast, where when they have charters come in, they kind of get into this aggressive stance of like, we need to recruit people. We need to make sure folks know that public education's a good, viable option. So looking at that, especially that 545 families in elementary, that's practically a whole school. So is there a way that we could actually proactively reach out to those families to ask them to come back?
I absolutely would like us to do that. And
okay,
I think I'll take that as a suggestion, and we will work on it.
Now, if I might add too, besides doing that, you made a really good point. And that's why we do use Twitter at times to tell our story. Okay, to tell our story, because there's always competition in business as well as in education. We have to tell our story. So it's something that and we have a very good story to tell, right? When teachers are just talking to our board meeting. So that's a really good point. And we are going to tell our story, and we're going to be very active as we engage to get more students back into public education.
That's awesome. And then my last question is just around apportionment. And Jeff, this might be for you, but there looks like there's going to be, the state is going to come in and actually give us apportionment for the next 2 years based on 2019, 2020, which means, it still means that we have to be savvy in budget, but it also means that we won't be stuck with kind of having to decrease our commitment to our teaching staff and our other staff, because we'll be able to stick a pin in it at that 2019, 2020. I guess A, are we kind of planning for that? How are we planning for it? And then B, would that do some kind of good unintended consequences like smaller class sizes and other little things as we ramp back up to full enrollment?
There's probably not a short answer to that question. And if I could ask you to wait until next week, we are going to be talking about the latest legislative changes. I would say that those bills are evolving, and I'm sure you're familiar with them.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, we did one last night. So that's why I was wondering. I'm like, yes.
So you probably know more than I do, but I plan to. In other words, we're creating a one-year budget, and you'll see that our fiscal outlook is much improved, that we don't need to make more reductions. What normally is a workshop is really an update, and we're going to talk about a number of things, including the bills that really matter at this point in time. And you can anticipate a longer conversation next week.
Okay, and then just so you know that that we did pass the apportionment bill, the 1476, off the floor, so it's heading to the other chamber.
So with that, if if I'm, and you can correct me, I think what that had helped us with is our levy cap, and that we're safe in terms of our levy collections. But the actual enrollment funding loss has been removed, and it's a part of your general budget discussions.
Yes.
So in
that's
terms
true.
of our long-term levy calculation, we're glad about that.
The levy, yes, the levy cap is.
And we are one of the districts that are going to rely upon ESSER, while other districts who have very low poverty are waiting for those green dollars. We're going to talk about red dollars and green dollars next week.
Yep. Perfect. Well, good. Well, I'm glad to be the bearer of good news.
President Mason, I have another question to piggyback on that, what Director Berg just brought up. My question to Mike is, if we are, as we return to the normal situation here, and you may have mentioned it as far as providing distance between our students as we go back to in-person, do we have adequate facilities to accommodate the number of students we project if we have to ensure 2 to 3 feet separations in the classroom?
So we are looking at the capacity resulting from a shift from the 6 foot to the 3 foot of physical distancing. With the 6 feet of distancing, our capacity, we've been using a working capacity of about 50%. It's actually a little bit higher than that. We are very hopeful that if we are able to reduce the 6 foot down to 3 foot, that we'll be up near 100% capacity in our classrooms. We still have to look at cafeterias and other spaces where the 6 foot and 3 foot physical distancing would affect capacities.
Thank you.
Other directors, student representatives, do you have questions? Okay, I'm hearing none. I will say thank you to Mr. Gunn for the presentation tonight, and we'll look forward to our next steps and better understanding the capital facilities plans as this is sort of a foundation to that conversation. Okay, next up is section 13.0, which is unfinished business. And tonight we do not have any unfinished business. And 14.0 is new business. And tonight we do not have any new business, which takes us to our upcoming agenda items. Dr. Salzman, may you please provide an overview?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the March 16th special meeting, the board will discuss budget development. At our regular meeting on March 23rd, 2021, the board will discuss the following: 24 credit plan update, dual language program plan, NAAC Martin Luther King Jr. the Essay Awards recognition, and our communication plan update. And then our special meeting scheduled for March 30th, 2021 will be the school reopening update.
Thank you. And 16.0 is executive or closed session. And tonight we do not have an executive or closed session. I'm getting a head shake over there from our council. And so that takes us to 17.0, which is adjournment. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. Great presentations, good conversation. And with that, I will go ahead and adjourn the March 9th, 2021 regular board meeting of Everett Public Schools Board of Directors. Thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Have
Bye-bye.
a great evening, everybody.